there was this complaint by Senator Lacson and Senator Hontiveros. Kasi they were mentioning billions and billions na saan na raw. Saan na ang bakuna at binigyan raw na tayong executive department tayo ng bilyon na mga pera. Kung saan na saan na daw itong bakuna with the billions that have been authorized by Congress para gastusin natin. Kindly explain to Senator Lacson and Senator Hontiveros so that they may be at least educated along this line.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, I already wrote a letter of explanation to the entire Senate explaining yung question nila as to our financing last year and the financing for the COVID vaccines. I only have 2 slides. The first slide is, sorry, can they put on the slides? Yeah. The first slide is what happened last year. Okay. Last year, so there's the chart here. You have the revenues of 2019, 2020, and then yung expected natin sa 2021. In 2019 nakakollect tayo ng 3.1 trillion pesos. First, let me explain the difference between million, billion, and trillion. Okay. When you think of 1 million, you should think of 1 Innova. Okay. When you think of 1 billion, you should think of 1,000 Innovas. When you think of 1 trillion, you should think of 1 million Innovas. So, this is trillions. Okay. So, we collected last year because of the tax reform that you authorized us to do and the Congress passed. We collected in 2019 3.1 trillion pesos. Bumabaho yan sa 2.86 trillion in 2020 kasi nag-lockdown tayo, yung business transactions bumaba, therefore yung income ng mga tao bumaba. So ang taxes na na-collect natin was lowered. On the other hand, yung gastos natin between 2019 and 2020 tumaas. 2019, gumastos tayo ng 3.8 trillion pesos. 2020, tumaas yan sa 4.23 trillion pesos. Kasi we gave the social amelioration program. That was about almost 250 billion pesos. And then we bought PPEs. We spent more for hospitals. We spent more for healthcare. So tumaso yan from 3.8 trillion to 4.23 trillion. Therefore, ang deficit natin, ang deficit is income minus expenditure. Ang deficit natin sa 2019 was only 666 billion pesos or 3.4% of GDP. Tumaaso yan to 1.37 trillion. 286 minus 423 is negative 1.37. So that went up to 7.6 trillion, 7.6%. Now, in 2019, we only borrowed 1 trillion pesos. However, sa 2020, we borrowed 2.7 trillion. The first part of the borrowings was to cover the deficit so that we could spend the 4.23. So, we borrowed 2.74 trillion. So, we borrowed more because, number one, more than the deficit, because we had more projects that we were still funding, like the build, the different bridges we were starting. So, we borrowed more. Plus, bumabaho yung interest rate in 2020. So, humiram tayo para bayaran yung old debt. Kasi mas mura na ang interest. So, therefore, at the end of 2019, our debt to GDP was only 39.6%. Now it's 54.5%. And that is caused mainly or solely by the COVID crisis. Sa 2021 ho, ang revenues natin will be more or less flat as compared to 2020. It's only 2.88 trillion. Our expenditures will be higher to 4.66 because we are spending more for healthcare, more for build, and salaries of government. So ang deficit ho natin is going to go up from 1.37 trillion to 1.78 trillion. So we will borrow this year around 3 trillion pesos. A little more than 2020. That is the plan. This is approved in the budget. Approved na yan sa budget na present natin. So, kung tatanungin tayo ng mga congressman at saka senators, this is really the base explanation of the financing we did last year. If they want a more detailed explanation, we can break down all of these numbers. Is that okay? Yeah. Oh. So, the reason is revenues went down because of the lockdown, less income, and our expenditures went up because of the COVID. So, we had to borrow more money. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sani, ang ano lang nila is, can we give the people a simpler analogy of saan na yung then the quoted an amount, saan na yung billion for the vaccines?
Okay, now, the next slide I have, this is explanation of what happened last year. Okay? So, gumawa rin ho tayo ng vaccine budget and financing. And we can put that up on the slides also. Now, these numbers are not trillion. These numbers are billion. Okay? 1,000 Innovas. Okay? Each billion. Okay? So, the total financing we have for the vaccines, logistics, and other supplies, including waste disposal, is 82.5 billion pesos. Saan po galing yan? DOH budget, 2.5 billion pesos. Bayanihan 2, yung extension, 10 billion pesos. So that subtotal of that is 12.5. So we also got financing from abroad. World Bank, 24.3 billion pesos. Asian Development Bank, 19.5 billion pesos. And Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, 14.6 billion. The subtotal is 58.4. Yan ang loans natin. So, 58 tapos we have another line, we got some savings. Because remember, last year, nag-substitute tayo ng loan. Bumaba yung interest rate natin. Kasi our credit rating is very strong. So when we borrowed, the interest rate was lower. So we were able to save, and we also able to get additional official development assistance of 11.6 billion pesos. So when you add 12.5 from general appropriations, 58.4 from the financing, from World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, plus the ODA is a total of 82.5 billion pesos. Now, 82.5 billion pesos will buy us enough doses to inoculate 100% of our adult population. Kasi according to the Department of Health, hindi pa pwede inoculate yung mga bata, di ba? 16 or 18 below, hindi pa pwede, di ba? Ang total population natin is around 110 million. Ang below 18 is 40 million. So 70 million lang to vaccinate. So that money, the 82 billion, plus the private sector and another 10 billion from the pesos from the LGUs will be able to vaccinate all the adults in the Philippines this year. This year.
So, sana yung pera na bilyon-bilyon dyan, nasa kamay ba natin yan ngayon?
Hindi po, nasa bangko pa. Kasi we did not withdraw yet. Kasi we will only withdraw when we pay.
Yes.
Because why should we hold the money? Kasi babayad tayo ng interest eh. So, mientras tanto na hindi pa na-deliver, hindi pa due ang payment, we'll keep it in the bank first.
Well, also the reason...
Pero itong 12.5 billion ho, nasa atin na yan.
So the reason why I request you to explain this to them. Ang buong akala kasi nila, yung pera na bilyon na ibinigay nila sa Kongreso, nandiyan na sa kamay natin, that it's called cash. At nasaan na yung pera. Sinasabi na natin, time and again, that the money is with the lending bank.
Still.
So we have not used any single centavo of it because as a matter of fact, about the vaccines that we are going to buy, pero donated ito lahat sa ngayon.
Sa ngayon, donated pa.
What is in our hands are the donated vaccines.
The donated, I think 500,000 lang eh. 500,000 doses lang eh.
Yeah, and the 400, you're referring to Sinovac,
yes.
China.
Yes.
Well, China gave us 500,000 free. Tapos, magdagdag sila ng 400,000 more. So that would make it 1 million. Yan, walang bayad yan. So, libre yan. Ngayon, itong dadating, day after tomorrow, is it... dadating na yung binabayaran natin, ay yung babayaran pala natin. Doon pa dapat sila magtanong kung nasaan na yung pera. And I am not really, ang pagkaakala ko sa commercial law ko, pag maghiram ka ng pera sa bangko, magbayad ka, it is not done by money. Kailangan po 5 truck dyan bago kakutin yung pera na yan. Yan po ay papilang. And, if you are afraid of corruption, let your mind go easy because these things are not susceptible to anything. The money is in the hands of the bank and they collect yung nagpabili sa atin ng bakuna from the bank. Hindi sa atin na pumunta yan kay Sunny Dominguez na bubuksan niya yung drawer. Sabi niya, ito na yung pangbayad. Hindi ho. Ano lang yan, that's a commercial law namin. May konti akong alam. Puro papel yan. What would be forwarded to them and to their account or to their banks, it's already paperwork. Kaya sana magdandahan magbigay ng mga billion-billion kasi people might really think na sa bagay, sinabi ko na sa iyo mga kababayan ko, kung maniwala kayo sa kanila, sige, bahala na, doon na kayo. Ang kayong maniwala kayo sa amin, sinabi na walang 5 sentimos na hinahawakan po namin. It's the bank who will pay upon our advice na na-deliver na yung bakuna. Hindi tayo ang magpunta. Sila, through paperwork, tawag lang, the transaction has been, the buy and sell, tapos na, at kukunin mo yung pera sa bangko. Kung hindi pa ho ninyo maintindihan yan, I really do not know how. Wala ho dito, basta bangko-bangko, especially the World Bank. I know that, sabihin nila, hindi naman kami nag-ano ng corruption. So, but when you try to ask us to explain where is the vaccines because yung billions na inallow ninyo that you authorize to be spent, inutang pa po yun. Siguro tapos na tayo dito sa COVID. I think unless ikaw na sunod mag-explain niya kasi mabuti ang Tagalog mo next time. Are you okay now?
Okay po, okay po. Kinukumpleto ko lang po yung 14-day quarantine at matatapos na rin naman po yung 14-day quarantine pero okay po tayo. Wala pong problema. At nagpapatuloy po tayo sa ating press briefings at parang wala lang po nangyari, kaya lang lahat po ay broadcast from isolation. Pero tuloy-tuloy po, ang masasabi ko lang po talaga, tumitindi po ang politika dahil malapit ng eleksyon at ginagamit talaga itong pandemya laban sa administrasyon. So kung meron pa pong konsyensyang natitira yung mga nais manalo, na desperadong manalo, sana po tumulong na lang po sila magbigay ng solusyon dito sa problemang ito kaysa pinagsasamantalahan po ang pandemya para sa kanilang mga selfish political gains.
Well,
pero matindi po talaga.
That's what you would call the classic case of if you want to appear white, you paint the other guy black. Para ang labas mo, puting-puti ka. Si Mr. Clean, parang ganon. Ganon yan style bulok. At wala naman siguro, except I have a few reminders for you. Sa mga kababayan ko, nasabi naman yung areas where they are, nasabi na ninyo yung places, okay na. So alam na ho ninyo kung anong hanggang saan kayo. Dito, the highest is the NCR. Alam mo kasi nanonood ako ng TV and every time COVID is being discussed, they play a certain footage of yun sa Divisoria. Oh, how can you? I was just trying to how can you control the people there? It's just a small place. There are so many thousands there trying to wriggle in and out of yan ang mahirap because of the space na wala kasi tapos dumating itong pandemya dito tayo nahirapan. So kung sirahan mo naman yan lahat, medyo tagilid na ang ekonomiya. And that's a problem. It will be disaster for our country. Kung sarahan mo talaga lahat, it would be disaster for the country. So balance na lang tayo. Total maliit pa naman ito, small not really small, but not so many are being affected. Hindi afflicted in the sense that your movement are being curtailed, and the curtailment of your free to travel is always subject to the power of the state to control the movement of its citizens, especially if there is a pandemic. The state has that kind of power, although hindi yan sa martial law, no? It's just putting you in the right places at the right time, at this time. So, may listahan lang kasi ako dito na